Hi, so this is video number 2, and the issue right now is what's going on in Venezuela. And it's a very, very serious situation. It is absolutely abominable, actually. And it's the same feeling I had when America and Britain was planning on invading Iraq, and in order to put a regime change and to deliver a democracy to the Iraqi people. And at the time, part of me was like, well, yeah, Saddam Hussein is very cruel. I had been campaigning against the sanctions because I knew that those sanctions were literally killing children. And I felt it was unfair that the people of a population were made to suffer so dreadfully because of the actions of their leader. And I didn't really understand much about what was going on in the Middle East at that time. I hadn't learned the history of the Middle East. Now I know the history of the Middle East. I know that history is exactly the same history as what's been happening in Latin America. But instead of America directly controlling the puppet regimes that get installed in the various Latin American countries, and then invariably get toppled and replaced with the people's choice that then get toppled again to be replaced with an even worse dictator, as is the plan for Venezuela now, that exactly all of that same thing had been happening for decades in the Middle East, mostly by rule of Britain, by British interests, and then later American interests. That puppet regimes, the people. I found that Iran and Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, in those 4 key countries, the people had each at some point elected a socio-capitalist leaders, not Soviet communism. When we talk about socialism, it's very important to move away from this actually capitalist created form of socialism as was established in Russia with the financial backing and assistance of the Rothschilds. Okay, so please remove these extremes. Socialism and capitalism are designed to work together. It's the way life operates on our planet. That's part of the intelligence of life. That life capitalizes but also operates on a social level to sustain its own species and also to contribute to the general continuance and welfare of the external world. Bees do not destroy the plants that they rely on for food. And at the same time, they're feeding themselves and profiting from the abundance of flowers on this earth. They are also performing a service to nature by pollinating the plants and providing food for other creatures. That's the way life operates. Socio-capitalism. This is what we need to understand. There is no division, okay? The left and right are created to work together, not to be at permanent war with each other. That's the road to ruin. That's the road that we are on right now. The people of the Middle East had unions. I discovered that Iran, for example, the people of Iran, the males, every male had a vote. Alright, there was still the stuff against women going on that has been happening throughout the Middle East for far too long, that Jesus tried to address, and also Prophet Muhammad. But that was, by then, had become their tradition, which the Quran has asked Muslims to abandon old ways and traditions which new knowledge has proven wrong. And that is one tradition that needs to be abandoned, is this idea that women are inferior, that females are inferior. Because, read it for yourself, Bible thumpers. In Genesis, God, let us make man, both male and female, in our own image. You don't need to go no further, do you? Set them to tame the earth. That's the fact. That is the fact. There is no one's inferior and one's superior. And if people aren't going to accept the facts of Genesis, then you may as well right now abandon all your Sabbath days. Because what is the point? Why are the faiths honouring these so-called Sabbath days when apparently they're from a concept of God that just is false? Because we can't even accept yet that a female is equal to a male. And deserves the same rights, the same power, and the same levels of respect and autonomy in this world. So, regardless of the fact that they were still, to a large degree, as in Britain and everywhere else, actually at that time, they were no different to British society in that sense, that women were generally accepted as inferior and, you know, should not have the power to vote. In Iran, nonetheless, every single male had a right to vote. Didn't matter how rich or poor they were. And every single male was entitled to only one vote. Now this is at the beginning, what was it, 1911 or 1906, the beginning of the 20th century. That was the situation in Iran. They had unions, and the people were all given the right to vote. So when you compare that to Britain, supposedly far more civilised than Iran, Persia as it was called at the time, its true name, Persia, Britain with its empire, apparently the most civilised and developed nation on earth, every British male did not have a right to vote. Well, the rich women who formed the suffragettes were all chaining themselves to railings, saying we should have a right to vote. The truth was that the average working male in Britain, 80% of the male population, had no right to vote. In order to vote, you needed to own some property, land, or a property, or be of a certain class, you see. And even worse, the more properties you owned, the more rights you had, the more votes you actually had. So, and also, men, the rich men, had another privilege, that they were not only allowed to vote in their constituency that they lived, and also in any constituency where they owned a property, they also had a right to vote in the town or city where at the university that they graduated from. You know, that apparently was democracy in Britain. When I looked at Syria, the same thing, people going on strike, people forming unions, people demanding workers' rights. Basically, people trying to assert their humanity and their rights to live as an intelligent species that lives with kindness, care and compassion. But this ruling consciousness that we know is Luciferian lives by its own law. It lives by the law of might equals right to do as thy will. It's a rapist law, because every woman is at risk under that law. Every woman and child is at risk under that law. And precisely because they aren't as physically powerful as a male. And so therefore they're not mighty. So therefore they're never righty, you see. And this is the same situation, is exactly what is now being imposed on Venezuela. But the only difference is that the world is very much more awake today to the shenanigans that have been going on. America's not claiming that Venezuela has weapons of mass destruction. What is the problem with the socio-capitalist government that is now established in Venezuela by the will and democracy of the people? It isn't Soviet communism, is it? Even Russia has abandoned that. And it's about time the people of this world, the so-called intelligent, educated people of the Western world, who are benefiting from 80% of this planet's produce, 20% of the global population benefiting the most from the 80% of this planet's produce, and 80% of the global population living in abject, varying degrees of poverty and misery, bereft of their rights, bereft of intelligence. We need to abandon that capitalist consciousness, because it isn't even capitalist, it's just crime. It's outright crime because it's operating outside the law. It's not operating with compassion, it's not operating with care, respect, consideration, it is not operating intelligently, and it is facilitating, sustaining and profiting from crime. And it does seek to criminalise the general human population by things like prohibition against natural substances that humanity has used for thousands and thousands of years. Like, for example, cannabis, a harmless plant that has been used by humanity for thousands and thousands of years. Surely, if it was that deadly and dangerous, we'd have hosts and hosts of historical records of how terrible societies became under the influence of cannabis or opium or any other natural substance. But we don't. There are safe things to use on this planet, there are toxins, but that's what intelligence is for. We learn, we teach our children, no, you don't eat those particular berries off a tree because they're poisonous. Or they have to only be used as a medicine and they're poisonous, so you can't actually have them. We educate people. And in a world where people are not driven to absolute despair, then there's not going to be such prevalence of drug addiction and alcoholism, because life itself will be so entertaining and interesting and enjoyable that people won't need to escape. Instead, the natural hallucinogens, substances that our planet creates, the life of our planet creates, will be employed to enhance our experiences, to enhance our life. And we can see how prohibition itself has provided trillions, actually, of funding to the very worst consciousnesses operating on our planet. Gangsters and their moles. It funds and sustains organised abuse and trafficking of children and murder of children, and inflicts terror and threats on whole communities, especially in South America where cocaine is grown. Never mind that the USA, in spite of its prohibition, in spite of the fact that its jails are full of the poorest drug addicts, drug users of their nation and drug sellers, still tons of cocaine is imported into America every year. And it's not getting through by people crossing over the border where there's no fencing. It's getting through because it's facilitated by an inner criminal network operating within America itself, and by some of the most powerful and influential people in America. For example, we now have evidence that the CIA is and has been very heavily involved in drug trafficking and spreading the addiction. And there's a host of private prisons all profiting, you know, and nobody really among those powers really cares to question about even the math of, well, why is it that we're prepared to spend, 40, 50, 60, 70, how many thousands of dollars a year to keep this alleged criminal in prison because they were found with some marijuana or they were selling marijuana? When, you know, why aren't we spending that money on these individuals to educate them about how to use drugs safely? Why are our police so busy focusing on an illegal plant material, instead of protecting children and dealing with violence against women or people who have somehow lost their minds, which isn't surprising, because the mental illness creates mental illness. And there's no doubt about it, we are being governed by the intellectually and emotionally disabled. They are, psychopaths. That is what they are. Intellectually and emotionally disabled. That means they need help. They need guidance. They need strong rulers, because actually they are not fit to rule. And it is that consciousness that threw away the head cornerstone of universal law, compassion, and replaced it with what was the stumbling block in life, ignorance. No, that's their head cornerstone. Ignorance is the head cornerstone of the law operating in our world today. Ignorance of rights, ignorance of life needs, ignorance of the truth of the universal intelligence that created us. No, we're going to create ourselves, apparently. We'll create our own law, say these males who consider themselves superior, who consider the organisation, social structure of a wolf pack to be civilised. And they learn to wear the sheepskins. Or else they don't bother and they just get worshipped and celebrated like the Donald Trumps of this world for just openly being the wolf that they are. And let's face it, the stupid and the weak, aren't they? So, us wolves, we're king, aren't we? No. Because, if a man's going to live by a human male is going to live like a wolf, then what is the point of him being a human being in the first place? There is a level of responsibility in being human, and the humans who are most fit to lead are the humans who have made the choice to accept intelligence and live by intelligence, not by the traditional doctrines, often maligned and corrupted beliefs of their ancestors or whatever consciousness has at some point decided to occupy their nation, as was happening in Palestine during the time that Jesus lived there. And it is important to understand Jesus in that context of what he was up against, what he was speaking out for. And he had realised that the people, his fellow Jews, had started to incorporate the occupying forces' traditions into their culture and into their faith. This idea that people had to buy special coins for the temple, for the synagogue, that was a purely Roman thing. In Rome, people had to swap produce to buy a golden coin in order to give that to the temple so that their prayer would be heard by one of their multiple gods. That was how actually money came into being. That's one of the foundations of it. And so eventually these gold coins became of value in themselves. So the gold coins outside the temple became worth more and more money. So the gold is the currency. Gold is what a soldier will fight for, because God, as far as they are aware, according to their tradition, imposed by the wolf pack governing them, this gold connects them directly to God. So if I'm paying you gold, that means you're working for God. So yeah, go and do your worst. Get as much gold as you can. Because life is a competition, and it's all about who's the winner and who's the loser. And as Donald Trump himself was recently stating quite blatantly, that when we invaded Iraq and Libya, we should have took their oil, because that's how it is, isn't it? The winners get the spoils of war. Well, I'll be explaining that in the next video. So, Jesus was trying to explain to his people, that's why he literally whipped the money exchangers out of the temple, because they had no place being there, and it was creating poverty among the people of Israel at that time, Palestine. The Jewish people had essentially become disconnected from the true foundation of their faith in an accurate concept of their belief in Yahweh, God, a compassionate, caring, intelligent God that provides an intelligent, compassionate, caring law to live by. He was explaining to those people that, look, these people who are sick, they've not been cursed by God. A woman is not cursed by God because she menstruates. The poor are not cursed by God. We have a duty, who are healthy and who have, to share with those who have not. But in this world, as Jesus explained, those who have are given more, and those who have not, even that which they have shall be taken away. And that is the law, part of the law of this universe, the way it operates. And it is true. The less of a living planet we have, then the less and less even that which we have shall be taken away. The more we give to life, the more we shall receive. But you see, these ruling people had manipulated and created the conditions of poverty and sickness. And precisely so they could say, yeah, these people are inferior and we're superior. So we're entitled to have more, because we who have more shall be given. Well, it just turns out that they were collecting the wrong kind of gold. Because the true gold in this universe is universal intelligence, the true golden light, quantum energy, intelligence. That's the true gold. This physical stuff, the South Americans, their historical traditional description of gold is excrement of the gods. That's what it is. It amounts to excrement. According to the universal intelligence, there's an abundance of gold in this universe. Gold is a very common substance. What's rare is life, intelligent life. A human child is rare in this world. In this universe. That's the fact. That's the fact of it. This ruling consciousness saying there's far too many people, so it doesn't matter, kill a few million here or there, because there's too many people anyway. No, there isn't. The universe asked us to go forth and multiply. Again, if you're not going to accept that, abandon your Sabbath day, all you Bible thumpers out there. There are enough people on this planet right now to clean the planet up, to establish the law, the true law, universal law of abundance and compassion, to cast out the present head cornerstone, ignorance, and to place that for a stumbling block. And the present stumbling block, compassion, shall be the head cornerstone, the one that the wolf pack builders refused. That shall be the head cornerstone. And the ignorance will be the stumbling block. People who ignore the law in a lawful society will immediately be recognised. And everybody will be committed to that law, because we will know that our planet and our children's very future depends on us adhering to intelligence and not veering from that. And as I've explained, not to punish people, but to recognise, look, these people are a danger because they have not got the intelligence to be able to choose correctly how to act and behave. They ignore the law. This person is emotionally and compassionately disabled. So they are not fit to be a ruler. There are certain jobs that such consciousness would be very good at, because being psychopathic doesn't necessarily mean that that person is a criminal or is evil. But in a world that is rewarding the psychopaths, because that's the kind of powers that psychopaths want, they form their own club, their own elitist club, then obviously it's going to be very easy for them. They aren't going to stumble on the stumbling block of compassion, are they? No, because compassion doesn't even exist in their minds anyway. They have no care conscience. And that is why the powers of America, the powers of this world, are all happy just to, forget about what the people want. What, you're going to spend your oil on providing education and healthcare and housing to your people and raising them up out of the degradation of the shanty towns and dire poverty they were all dumped into? Oh, how terrible. That's extremist. It's actually fascist. You know, Chavez was not a fascist. He was a native Venezuelan. He understood exactly what was going on, exactly what is being shared, what was being shared here by Abby Martin and so many other people. The last American vagabond, Abby Martin. Check them out. He knew. No, what's fascist and extremist are the powers of this world, and even the powers that are now operating in Venezuela as alleged opposition, that want to say no. We're going to have Venezuela's resources. We're going to have Venezuela's oil. It's going to serve our interests. Screw the people. And in fact, until we get what we want, we're going to make you suffer. We're going to slap sanctions on you. What for? What for? Is Venezuela threatening anybody? Yes. But they are, aren't they? Because a successful socio-capitalist society set up in Venezuela as an example to the whole of this world is what the powers of this world do not want. Because they do not ever want to be proven wrong. And that was why Germany was toppled. That was why, that, again, it's too long for me to go into now. I would have to make an entire different video explaining Germany. But that's basically what had been going on since from the beginning of the 20th century. Because Germany was so successful, and it did operate on a socio-capitalist level. Most of the factories, the industrialisation by Germany was owned by the state. And I'm talking about the Germanic Empire, the countries that associated themselves as part of the Germanic states. And they did that. They were successful, a very wealthy, intelligent, productive nation, and they did that without robbing the people of their cottage industries, without robbing the people of their common lands. In fact, the cottage industries and the people on the common lands prospered. You see, and again, it was an example that had to be cut down before it could grow. And that is exactly what happened with Libya. The same thing was happening in Libya. And anywhere that there's a threat that socio-capitalism will rise, sanity and intelligence, basically, true humanity shows its face, you're going to have the psychopaths there ready to cut it down. Because no, only they are superior. They're the winners. They're right because they have the might.